We're back! Last video, I did read chapter 13. It was actually chapter 13, but the X, I forgot the X meant 10, and so I just saw 3 1s, and I did think it was an 8, but it is 13. And Roman numerals are really getting me. So today, after we read chapter 13, we read chapter 14. So today we are going to read chapter 14 of Sense and Sensibility, XIV. Oh my God. So Colonel Brandon had somewhat of a mystery event happen last time, and he did need to leave, and he left his whole party, and they were not able to go to Whittle, and everybody's upset. And Eleanor did find out that Marianne did go off alone with Mr. Willoughby and went inside some sort of house. And it was very unsensible, but Marianne thought it was very sensible. She didn't see anything wrong with it. She just felt that it was okay to do. So on Eleanor. So let's find out some more juice on Colonel Brandon, huh? Let's find some more tea. Chapter 14. 14. God. The sudden termination of Colonel Brandon's visit at the park, with his steadiness in concealing its cause, filled the mind and raised the wonder of Mrs. Jennings for 2 or 3 days. There is nothing like trying to fill in the blanks for other people. There's nothing like trying to solve a mystery, especially for somebody like Mrs. Jennings. She's like, we've got to know what it is. Sometimes it is hard to let it go. It's so funny. She was a great wonderer, and as everyone must be who takes a very lively interest in all the comings and goings of all their acquaintance. She wondered with little intermission what could be the reason of it, was sure there must be some bad news, and thought over every kind of distress that could have befallen him, with a fixed determination that he should not escape them all. Something very melancholy must be the matter, I am sure, said she. I could see it in his face. Poor man. I am afraid his circumstances may be bad. The estate at Delaford was never reckoned more than 2,000 a year, and his brother left everything sadly involved. I do think he must have been sent for about money matters, for what else can it be? I wonder whether it is so. I would give anything to know the truth of it. Perhaps it is about Miss Williams, and by the by, I dare say it is, because he looked so conscious when I mentioned her. Maybe she is ill in town. Nothing in the world more likely, for I have a notion she is always rather sickly. I would lay any wager it is about Miss Williams. It is not so very likely that he should be distressed in his circumstances now, for he is a very prudent man, and to be sure must have cleared the estate by this time. I wonder what can it be? Maybe his sister is worse at Avignon, and has sent for him over. His setting off in such a hurry seems very like it. Well, I wish him out of all his trouble with all my heart, and a good wife into the bargain. Just hope he gets married and out of trouble. So wondered, so talked Mrs. Jennings, her opinion varying with every fresh conjecture, and all seeming equally probable as they arose. Eleanor, though she felt really interested in the welfare of Colonel Brandon, could not bestow all the wonder on his going so suddenly away, which Mrs. Jennings was desirous of her feeling. For besides the circumstance did not, in her opinion, justify such a lasting amazement or variety of speculation, her wonder was otherwise disposed of. It was engrossed by the extraordinary silence of her sister and Willoughby on the subject, which they must know to be particularly interesting to them all. As this silence continued, every day made it appear more strange and more incompatible with the disposition of both. why they should not openly acknowledge to her mother and his health what their constant behaviour toward each other declared to have taken place, Eleanor could not imagine. She could easily convince that marriage might not be immediately in their power, for although Willoughby was independent, there was no reason to believe him rich. His estate had been rated by Sir John at about 600 or 700 a year. But he lived at an expense to which that income could hardly be equal, and he had himself often complained of his poverty. Whoa! Living over his means. But for this strange kind of secrecy maintained by them relative to their engagement, which in fact concealed nothing at all, she could not account. It was so wholly contradictory to their general opinions and practice, that a doubt sometimes entered her mind of their really being really engaged, and this doubt was enough to prevent her making any inquiry of Marianne. Secrecy. Nothing could be more expressive of the attachment to them all than Willoughby's behaviour. To Marianne it had all the distinguishing tenderness which a lover's heart can give, and to the rest of the family it was the affectionate attention of a son and a brother. The cottage seemed to be considered and loved by him as his home. Many more of his hours were spent there than at Allenham. And if no general engagement collected them at the park, the exercise which called him out in the morning was almost certainly of ending there, where the rest of the day was spent by himself at the side of Marianne and by his favourite pointer at her feet. Wow. One evening in particular, about a week after Colonel Brandon had left the country, his heart seemed more than usually open to every feeling of attachment to the objects around him, and on Mrs. Dashwood's happening to mention her design of improving the cottage in the spring, he warmly opposed every alteration of a place which affection had established as perfect with him. "What!" he exclaimed, "improve this dear cottage? No, that I will never consent to. Not a stone must be added to its walls, not an inch to its size, if my feelings are regarded." "Do not be alarmed," said Miss Dashwood. "Nothing of the kind will be done, for my mother will never have the money enough to attempt it." "I am heartily glad of it," he cried. "May she always be poor, if she can employ her riches no better." "Thank you, Willoughby, but you may be assured that I would not sacrifice one sentiment of local attachment of yours, or of any one whom I am loved, for all the improvements in the world. Depend upon it that whatever unemployed sum may remain, when I make up my accounts in the spring, I would even rather lay it uselessly by than dispose of it in a manner so painful to you. But are you really so attached to this place as to see no defect in it?" "I am," said he. "To me it is faultless. Nay, more, I consider it as the only form of building in which happiness is attainable. And were I rich enough, I would instantly pull calm down and build it up again in the exact plan of this cottage." Whoa. Big words. "With dark, narrow stairs and a kitchen that smokes, I suppose," said Eleanor. "Yes," cried he, in the same eager tone, "with all and everything belonging to it, in no one convenience or inconvenience about it, should the least variation be perceptible. Then, and only then, under such a roof, I might perhaps be as happy at calm as I have been at Barton." "I flatter myself," replied Eleanor, "that even under the disadvantage of better rooms and a broader staircase, you will hereafter find your own house as faultless as you now do this." "There certainly are circumstances," said Willoughby, "which might greatly endear it to me, but this place will always have one claim on my affection, which no other can possibly share." Mrs. Dashwood looked with pleasure at Marianne, whose fine eyes were fixed so expressively on Willoughby as plainly denoted how well she understood him. Everybody's getting lost in their feelings, and they're not actually being truthful with each other. It's just not good. Yeah, there's something about, like, is it like love bombing? Is this like love bombing? How often did I wish, added he, when I was at Allenham this time 12 month, that Barton Cottage were inhabited. I never passed within view of it without admiring its situation, and grieving that no one should live in it. How little did I then think that the very first news I should hear from Mrs. Smith, when I next came into the country, would that be that Barton Cottage was taken, and I felt an immediate satisfaction and interest in the event, which nothing but a kind of prescience, 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 nothing but a kind of prescience. Shoot, it's pre-science, but I don't know. Pre-science. Well, prescience, the fact of knowing something before it takes place, foreknowledge. Whoa, but a kind, which nothing but a kind of prescience of what happiness I should experience from it can I account for. Oh, he couldn't even imagine how happy it could make him. Must it not have been so, Marianne? Speaking to her in a lowered voice, then continuing his former tone, he said, and yet this house you would spoil, Mrs. Dashwood. You would rob it of its simplicity by imaginary improvement, and this dear parlour in which our acquaintance first began, in which so many happy hours have been since spent by us together, you would degrade to the condition of common entrance, and everybody would be eager to pass through the room which has hitherto contained within itself more real accommodation and comfort than any other apartment of the handsomest dimensions in the world could possibly afford. My goodness gracious. Talk it up, Willoughby. Mrs. Dashwood again assured him that no alteration of the kind would be attempted. You are a good woman, he warmly replied. Your promise makes me easy. Extend it a little farther, and it will make me happy. Tell me that not only your house will remain the same, but that I shall ever find you and yours as unchanged as your dwelling. Nothing should ever change, huh? I don't know, Willoughby. And that you will always consider me with the kindness which has made everything belonging to you so dear to me. The promise was readily given, and Willoughby's behaviour during the whole of the evening declared at once his affection and happiness. Okay, God, we get it. Shall we see you tomorrow to dinner? Said Mrs. Dashwood, when he was leaving them. I do not ask you to come in the morning, for we must walk to the park to call on Lady Middleton. He engaged to be with them by 4 o'clock. Something's a little fishy, eh? Something's a little fishy? He said, don't let anything change, and I love it so much, and don't change anything. This, to me, feels like, and I have to leave. I don't know why. I don't know why it feels like that. Okay, we should keep going. Okay, chapter XV 15. Mrs. Dashwood's visit to Lady Middleton took place the next day, and 2 of her daughters went with her. Oh, yeah, I always forget there's a 3rd daughter. They, never mention her. What's her name again? Margaret? God. But Marianne excused herself from being of the party under some trifling pretext of employment, and her mother, who concluded that a promise had been made to Willoughby the night before of calling on her while they were absent, was perfectly satisfied while her remaining at home. Whoa. On their return from the park, they found Willoughby's curricle and servant in waiting at the cottage, and Mrs. Dashwood was convinced that her conjecture had been just. So far it was all that as she had foreseen, but on entering the house she beheld what no foresight had taught her to expect. They were no sooner in the passage than Marianne came hastily out of the parlour, apparently in violent affliction, with her handkerchief at her eyes, and without noticing them ran upstairs. Surprised and alarmed, they proceeded directly into the room she had just quitted, where they found only Willoughby, who was leaning against the mantelpiece with his back towards them. He turned round on their coming in, and his countenance showed that he strongly partook of the emotion which overpowered Marianne. Is anything the matter with her? Cried Mrs. Dashwood as she entered. Is she ill? I hope not, he replied, trying to look cheerful, and with a forced smile presently added, It is I who may rather expect to be ill, for I am now suffering under very heavy disappointment. Disappointment? Yes, for I am unable to keep my engagement with you. Mrs. Smith has this morning exercised the privilege of riches upon a poor dependent cousin by sending me on business to London. I have just received my dispatches and taken my farewell of Allenham, and by way of exhilaration I now come to take farewell of you. To London? Are you going this morning? Almost this moment. This is very unfortunate, but Miss Smith must be obliged, and her business will not detain you from us for long, I hope. He coloured as he replied, You are very kind, but I have no idea of returning to Devonshire immediately. My visits to Mrs. Smith are never repeated within the 12-month. And is Mrs. Smith your only friend? Is Allenham the only house in the neighbourhood to which you will be welcome? For shame, Willoughby. Can you wait for an invitation here? His colour increased, and his eyes fixed on the ground, he only replied, You are too good. Mrs. Dashwood looked at Elinor with surprise. Elinor felt equal amazement. For a few moments everyone was silent. Mrs. Dashwood first spoke. I have only to add, my dear Willoughby, that at Barton Cottage you will always be welcome, for I will not press you to return here immediately, because you only can judge how far that might be pleasing to Mrs. Smith, and on this head I shall be no more disposed to question your judgment than to doubt your inclination. My engagements are at present, replied Miss Willoughby confusedly, are of such a nature that I dare not flatter myself. He stopped. S-T-O-P-T. I wish we spelled it like that. Mrs. Dashwood was too much astonished to speak, and another pause succeeded. This was broken by Willoughby, who said with a faint smile, It is folly to linger in this manner. I will not torment myself any longer by remaining among friends whose society it is impossible for me to now to enjoy. Gosh. He then hastily took leave of them all and left the room. They saw him step into the carriage, and in a minute it was out of sight. Mrs. Dashwood felt too much for speech, and instantly quitted the parlour to give way in solitude to concern and alarm which this sudden departure occasioned. This is curious. Elinor's uneasiness was at least equal to her mother's. She thought of what had just passed with anxiety and distrust. Willoughby's behaviour in taking leave of them, his embarrassment and affection of cheerfulness, and above all his unwillingness to accept her mother's invitation, a backwardness so unlike a lover, so unlike himself, greatly disturbed her. One moment she feared that no serious design had ever been formed on his side, and the next that some unfortunate quarrel had taken place between him and her sister. The distress in which Marianne had quitted the room was such a serious quarrel could most reasonably account for, though when she considered what Marianne's love for him was, a quarrel seemed almost impossible. But whatever might be the particulars of the separation, her sister's affliction was indubitable. And she thought with the tenderest compassion of that violent sorrow which Marianne was in all probability not merely giving way to as what's happening to my brain? This is a violent sorrow which Marianne was in all probability not merely giving way to as a relief, but feeding and encouraging as a duty. In about half an hour her mother returned, and though her eyes were red, her countenance was not cheerful. Ah, dear Willoughby is now some miles from Barton, Elinor, said she, as she sat down to work, and with how heavy a heart does he travel? It is all very strange, so suddenly to be gone. It seems but the work of a moment. And last night he was with us so happy, so cheerful, so affectionate. I'm with Elinor in this. And now after only 10 minutes' notice, gone too, without intending to return. Something more than what he owned to us must have happened. He did not speak. He did not behave like himself. You must have seen the difference as well as I. What can it be? Can they have quarrelled? Why else should he have shown such unwillingness to accept your invitation here? It was not inclination that he wanted, Elinor. I could plainly see that. He could not he had not the power of accepting it. I have thought it all over, I assure you, and I can perfectly account for everything that at first seemed strange to me as well as to you. Can you indeed? Yes, I have explained it to myself in the most satisfactory way, but you, Eleanor, will love to doubt where you can. It will not satisfy you, I know, but you shall not talk me out of my trust in it. I am persuaded that Mrs. Smith suspects his regard for Marianne, disapproves of it, perhaps because she has other views of him, and on that account is eager to get him away, and that the business which she sends him off to transact is invented as an excuse to dismiss him. This is what I believe to happen. He is moreover aware that she does disapprove the connection. He dares not therefore at present confess to her this engagement with Marianne, and he feels himself obliged from his dependent situation to give in to her schemes and absent himself from Devonshire for a while. You will tell me, I know, that this may or may not have happened, but I will listen to no cavil, unless you can point out any other method of understanding the affair as satisfactory as this. And now, Eleanor, what have you to say? Nothing, for you have anticipated my answer. Then you would have told me that it might or might not have happened. Oh, Eleanor, how incomprehensible are your feelings! You had rather take evil upon credit than good. You had rather look out for misery for Marianne and guilt for poor Willoughby than an apology for the latter. You are resolved to think him blamable because he took leave of us with less affection than usual behaviour has shown, and is no allowance to be made for inadvertence or for spirits depressed by recent disappointment, and are no probabilities to be expected merely because they are not certainties. Is nothing due to the man whom we all have so much reason to love, and no reason in the world to think ill of? You can't think ill of somebody? I don't know. To the possibility of motives unanswerable in themselves, though unavoidable secret for a while. And after all, what is it you suspect of him? I can hardly tell myself, but suspicion of something unpleasant is the inevitable consequence of such an alteration as we have just witnessed him. There is great truth, however, in what you have now urged of the allowances which ought to be made for him, and it is my wish to be candid in my judgment of everybody. Willoughby may undoubtedly have very sufficient reasons for his conduct, and I hope that he has, and I will hope that he has. But it would have been more like Willoughby to acknowledge them at once. Secrecy may be advisable, but still I cannot help wondering at his being practiced by him. It's being practiced by him. Yeah, the whole secrecy thing. I don't know what that is. That's so weird. Do not blame him, however, for departing from his character where the deviation is necessary. But you really do admit the justice of what I have said in his defence? I am happy, and he is acquitted. Not entirely. It may be proper to conceal their engagement if they are engaged from Mrs. Smith, and if that is the case, it must be highly expedient for Willoughby to be but little in Devonshire at present. But this is no excuse for their concealing it from us. Concealing it from us, my dear child! Do you excuse Willoughby and Marianne of concealment? This is strange indeed, when your eyes have been reproaching them every day for incautiousness. I want no proof of their affection, said Eleanor, but of their engagement I do. I am perfectly satisfied of both. Yet not a syllable has been said to you on the subject by either of them. I have not wanted syllables where actions have spoken so plainly. He has not his behaviour to Marianne and to all of us for at least the last fortnight declared that he loved and considered her as his future wife, and that he felt for us the attachment of the nearest relation. Have we not perfectly understood each other? Has not my consent been daily asked by his looks, his manner, his attentiveness, his affectionate respect? My Eleanor, is it possible to doubt their engagement? How could such a thought occur to you? How is it to be supposed that Willoughby, persuaded as he must be of your sister's love, should leave her, and leave her perhaps for months, without telling her of his affection? That they should part without a mutual exchange of confidence? I confess, replied Eleanor, that every circumstance except one is in favour of their engagement, but that one is the total silence of both on the subject, and with me it almost outweighs every other. How strange this is! You must think wretchedly indeed of Willoughby, if after all that is openly passed between them you can doubt the nature of the terms on which they are together. Has he been acting a part on his behaviour to your sister all this time? Do you suppose him really indifferent to her? No, I cannot think that. He must and does love her, I am sure. But with a strange kind of tenderness if he can leave her with such an indifference, such carelessness of the future as you attribute to him. You must remember, my dear mother, that I have never considered this matter as certain. I have had my doubts, I confess, but they are fainter than they were, and they may soon be entirely done away. If we find they correspond, every fear of mine will be removed. A mighty concession indeed. If you were to see them at the altar, you would suppose they were going to be married. Ungracious girl. You would suppose they were going to be married. But I require no such proof. Nothing, in my opinion, has ever passed to justify doubt. No secrecy has been attempted. All has been uniformly open and unreserved. You cannot doubt your sister's wishes. It must be Willoughby's, therefore, whom you suspect. But why? He is not a man of honour and feeling. Has there been any inconsistency on his side to create alarm? Can he be deceitful? I hope not. I believe not, cried Eleanor. I love Willoughby, sincerely love him, and suspicion of his integrity cannot be more painful to yourself than to me. It has been involuntary, and I will not encourage it. I was startled, I confess, by the alteration in his manners this morning. He did not speak like himself, and did not return your kindness with any cordiality. But all this may be explained by such a situation of his affairs as you have supposed. He had just parted from my sister, had seen her leave him in the greatest affliction, and if he felt obliged, from a fear of offending Mrs. Smith, to resist the temptation of returning here soon, and yet aware that by declining your invitation, by saying that he was going away for some time, he should seem to act an ungenerous, a suspicious part by our family, he might well be embarrassed and disturbed. In such a case, a plain and open avowal of his difficulties would have been more to his honour, I think, as well as more consistent with his general character. But I will not raise objections against any one's conduct on so illiberal a foundation as a difference in judgment from myself, or a deviation from what I may think right and consistent. You speak very properly. Willoughby certainly does not deserve to be suspected. Though we have not known him long, he is no stranger in this part of the world, and who has ever spoken to his disadvantage? Had he been in a situation to act independently and marry immediately, it might have been odd that he should leave us without acknowledging everything to me at once. But this is not the case. It is an engagement in some respects, not preposterous, prosperously begun. But the marriage must be at a very uncertain distance, and even secrecy, as far as it can be observed, may now be very advisable. We're all really giving Willoughby the benefit of the doubt here, and I think Eleanor is suspicious, as she should be. Somebody who can just come in and be like, done. They were interrupted by the entrance of Margaret, and Eleanor was then at liberty to think over the representations of her mother, to acknowledge the probability of many, and hope for the justice of all. They saw nothing of Marianne till dinner time, when she entered the room and took a place at the table without saying a word. Her eyes were red and swollen, and it seemed as if her tears were even then restrained with difficulty. She avoided the looks of all of them, could neither eat nor speak, and after some time, on her mother's silently pressing her hand with tender compassion, her small degree of fortitude was quite overcome. She burst into tears and left the room. This violent oppression of her spirits continued the whole evening. She was without any power, because she was without any desire of command over herself. Been there. The slightest mention of anything relative to Willoughby overpowered her in an instant. Oh, my God! And though her family were most obnoxiously attentive to her comfort, it was impossible for them, if they spoke at all, to keep clear of every subject which her feelings connected them with. Oh, God. Okay. Wow. Dark days in the Dashwood family. Well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope you get to read a good book today or a part of a good book. And happy reading. And ta ta. See you next time in Emily's Corner. Ta ta.